I'm Nick von Stein. You can follow us on our live site where we have a daily selection of podcast article uploads as well as music you can listen to on the live stream. Today with me I have Enlin Neveling from Atvance Intellect. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you, Nick.
So we're going to be having a wonderful discussion on how data is driving automation. And, it really comes down to the crux of the fourth industrial revolution is the fact that it's A, data-driven, and B, it's driving this process of automation. So we need to unpack these terms, and we'll get to that in a moment. But just tell us about how you work in the business at Atvance Intellect and what you do.
Sure. I'm the senior solutions manager for the business, and I run a small team of very skilled specialists, consultants, if you will, and they essentially build platforms for customers to collect data from various different sources, and then we normalize the data, essentially format it and put it into a context or a medium that they could use for business purposes. It could just be for reporting, or it could lead on to automation or something like that. So that in a nutshell covers what we do in layman's terms.
Let's talk about automation then. Everyone, well, most people these days know the term, and it's viewed in a negative light because obviously people don't want to lose their jobs. But at the same time, there are these market forces that come into play, and automation can make everyone's lives easier.
Sure. Automation is essentially, the ability to kind of use a robotic process or a coded piece of software that would essentially automate what a human would normally do. Some examples, and I don't think many people realize it, but with the whole COVID-19 thing coming up, and you have to wear a mask outside when you go out to the shops. We're so used to looking up at our phone when you log into internet banking or anything, because you're used to facial recognition to unlock your mobile banking app. Now, that is a form of automation that we've become so used to that we actually didn't understand the impact of it. And with a mask on, your phone doesn't recognize you anymore. So you either have to pull the mask off, let the facial recognition do its thing, or you need to manually type in your password or your PIN or whatever it is that you were using to authenticate to the system. Now, all of these little algorithms and these little features, as we've come to know them from a consumer perspective, is essentially built on big data analytics. In the case of the facial recognition, it's a deep learning algorithm that uses sample sets of images that was captured of your face to teach itself to recognize you as an individual. And that same technology is used in many other cases. There's also, for example, Google search engine that also uses machine learning algorithms to optimize searches to make sure you get the best results for whatever string you were looking for, or for whatever topic you were looking to get information on, and they'll make sure that the result is optimized for your purposes, and that's the closest possible match for your needs.
You said at the start that there's a connection between data and automation and how data is driving automation. What is that connection?
So the connection essentially between the two is that in order to automate, you need data to make sure the automation does the right things. So it could be part of the validation process. So if you think about how automation would occur, is, let's say, for example, in a typical system, and this is something we do every day, there's an alert that occurs in the environment that we're monitoring, and from a big data perspective, and we want something to occur automatically. Let's say, for example, this alert pops up. Automation would then actually, based on the alert and the context within that alert, so essentially the data that we're getting from the alert, automation would go into the system and pull some additional detail of other data sets we may have, and it may interrogate other systems to say, listen, this alert, is it actually something I need to be worried about? And then it will bring that context into the alert, and based on certain decision-making criteria you can build into the automation, you can then either get this bot or this automated script to automatically close off the alert, or to say, listen, this is actually something you need to be concerned about, and escalate it to a higher tier or a more senior engineer, or just provide the engineer that is responding to this alert with more context, more information that will help him respond faster.
It really is about those response times, especially in the modern day world that we live at the moment. You and I, just to give the listeners some insight into the backgrounds, we were supposed to record earlier, but there were some issues, and yet here we are recording later on in the day.
100%. I think sometimes there's a lot of bad connotation when people say automation takes away jobs, and I tend to look at it slightly differently. I think automation frees up the time, especially in the industries we're working on. It frees up the time of analysts and engineers leveraging data to spend time on more important things, stuff that they actually enjoy. And the stuff that we're typically automating is the mundane and the repeatable stuff. Stuff you're going to do 50 to 100 times a day. There's not a person on the planet that likes to do. You get people that like to do, the same thing over and over again, but very few of us see that as a challenge, and we like some to mix things up a bit, if you will.
Now let's move over onto how exactly you measure this. So I imagine that's probably been the hardest thing to structure and to coordinate, is giving businesses some form of, I hate to use the term, but ROI.
Yes. Yeah. So ROI is quite important, and I think it's very hard to create a business case for automation without putting some form of return on investment or promise of return on investment on the table. So what we've done with a number of organizations, specifically in security incident response, so these are typically security analysts looking for hackers, if you will, in a big corporate environment, or just the guys monitoring the IT systems. Now, these guys would be inundated with large volumes of alerts that they need onto on a daily basis. And how we would measure this is we would essentially quantify the volume of alerts. And what we would then do is we would actually, calculate the amount of time that each analyst spend on these alerts. And through that process, we would identify a couple of things: the total time it takes them to close a single alert, the amount of alerts that they can close on a single day. And there's a couple of other metrics that's important. But at the end of the day, the best way to quantify this is obviously, time saved, and time given back, if you will. And what we then do is we look at the common tasks in typically that analyst response process. What does he do when he gets an alert? And most of them, because they're doing the same thing, would have very similar and very common tasks across them. And then we put a process together and saying, listen, if we automate these 4 things during the investigative process of this specific analyst within this role, we could give him back 80% of his time. Meaning we're using automated jobs to automate 80% of his work, which means he can spend time, on doing better and more advanced things in his day-to-day. So we're actually giving him time back, and we're giving the company extra capacity. And once you start looking at it from that angle, it really becomes very easy to quantify. It does require that you do the measurements in terms of, and you need to have an understanding of what your analysts are spending their day on, how much alerts, and what their case volume is, etc. All of those things then become very important.
At Atvance, how do you guys incorporate these concepts into your model?
So there's a couple of things. We actually see, so we obviously deliver this, data-driven automation as a service to customers. But internally, we believe it's part of a cultural mindset in terms of how we operate. Essentially, if you want to automate anything, you need to kind of create a set of standards, and you also need to simplify stuff. So, and we have a principle that says, if we do something once, that's great. But if we have to do it again, we automate. And the minute something becomes repeatable, there should be some form of consistency. So through the assistance of standards and defining, standard mechanisms or standard processes, if you will, for a set task, we can then say, listen, we're going to create a set of templates, and these templates could then be used by automation, which would then, be used to fast track some of the work we do. And we've used some of the concepts successfully in deployments. Obviously, there's processes that's quite easy to automate, and other stuff takes a bit longer. But it is a process that you can't boil the ocean in one day. You need to take it bit by bit and build it up slowly.
And how does this process look like for other companies? Because whether you're a corporate or whether you're an SME, it's going to require very different structures, shall we say.
Yeah, so the most important aspect of this is really to understand, if do you have a business case for automation in your organization? And first and foremost, if you've got large teams doing repetitive work, and the headcount itself. Now, the goal of this is not to reduce headcount. I think every organization today could use their people better, and they could get their people to do more advanced things. It's just about applying the freeing up their time to make sure they get the opportunity to do that. Now, if you've got any team doing large volumes or large quantities of repetitive work, that involves ongoing routines, call scripts or repeatable processes on a day-to-day basis. The approach would be to take a process. Let's say, for example, it's a call center process where a person responds to a call script. Try and understand how what involves how the person responds to that process, and see which bits of unpack how you would unpack that into an automated process. If you build a typical workflow in terms of what's involved to actually get the job done, and then you unpack that and you build it out into a automated flow. And that's typically how we approach customers. Customers will say to us, listen, my security analysts are inundated with security alerts, and they can't process them all. And what we would do is we would go back and say, okay, let's try and understand what it is that these guys are doing, how they're doing it, and then we start mapping out typically the common workflows that we see within in those business processes that they use to respond to incidents, and we then put a plan together and a proposal to automate the workload for them, and with a potential promise on ROI with some prototyping that we've done.
I think where a lot of companies get stuck is they can see the benefits, but then they try and do it themselves, or they don't know exactly what their end goals are going to be. And so if you don't know where your destination is, you can't really map out a journey, so to speak. I think that's where a lot of them get messed up, get lost on the path.
100%. I think the biggest challenge as well, and what you see, there's a lot of really good stuff happening in organizations and innovation that's happening by very small, individual, maybe an individual or a small team. The challenge is, as I mentioned to you before, automation is kind of a cultural thing. You need to think automation. You need to think about, I see someone doing this 50 times a day. Why can't I just automate? Why can't I just, build a script or build an automated process to take away that time that this resource individual is spending on just closing tickets. So it's a bit of a cultural thing. And if you want this to scale out in the enterprise, what we found works well involves a bit of HR. And with most, big enterprise projects, it's good to reward people for the right behavior. And the right behavior in this regard would be to make sure that create standards for your processes. Make sure your processes that you use within a call center or for a specific business process is well documented. Once it's well documented and it becomes fairly consistent because it's well documented and people are following that process, it then becomes easy to quantify the time people spend on that process, because you actually have a well-defined and a well-structured process. And once you've quantified and defined the amount of time spent, it becomes easier to look for bottlenecks in the process. It becomes very easy to identify, listen, there's an opportunity for automation maybe in the second or third step, and you just automate that piece to showcase the value. So the idea behind it is it's more a cultural thing than a single piece of technology. It's a mindset than more mindset than anything.
Now, this is our last podcast that we're currently doing with you guys over at Atvance Intellect. So I'd like to just use the remaining bit of time to kind of wrap up everything. We've had so many amazing topics by you, by Jason, by Sean, and by Mashant. It's been a great 10 podcasts now. just from your side, what would you, in closing, like everyone listening to hear, and not just on our side, this is going up onto your guys' distribution networks as well.
Mm-hmm. So I think, people would, everyone is, the biggest challenge organizations have, and there's a bit of a, if you go onto Google and you do a search on big data and automation, there's probably more negativity around it, because a lot of early adopters tried a lot of different things and they failed. And a lot of people also have a misconception about what big data is, and the word big data is just a buzzword. Essentially, any organization, whether you are a five-man organization or 100,000 employee multinational corporate, data is being generated within your environment every single day in different aspects of the business. The key there is to make sure that you spend your time on collecting and analyzing the data that's going to make the biggest difference to your bottom line. And the biggest difference to any initiative you want to accomplish. It doesn't necessarily need to be rands and cents. It could be time spent. It could be changing your business strategy because of what you're seeing in the data you've analyzed. And don't be afraid of it. There's many tools out there that can assist you on this journey. The key, though, is to understand, the value of your data, and how it applies to your business and how it could benefit your business. And then from there, start small, first and foremost. Don't try and boil the ocean, from day one, because that is unfortunately where most of the organizations that's gone down this journey, that's failed, and that's essentially where they've gone wrong. I think the most important thing is start off with something small, prove the value of that, and then build on the successes of your previous project or your previous initiative to make sure you can maintain that momentum. And slowly but surely you'll see the culture within the organization will change to be data driven. And once they understand the value of the data to their whole environment, they would then start looking at automation to be a bit more agile, to look at things, and that itself could be a differentiator to any organization that follows that approach.
If there's anything we've learned in the last few months, is that everything's linked together. So when you're thinking about data, you should be thinking about these automation concepts, because as much as big data was on the horizon 10, 15 years ago, automation is on the horizon now. And those that can get ahead of the time can potentially, be innovative, maybe set a market trend, and also at the same time use NAN to reap the benefits in the long run financially.
100%.
Enlin, thank you so much for your time, and also on behalf of me to you and everyone else at Atvance, thanks so much, guys. It's been wonderful chatting to you guys over the last 2 months.
Thank you very much, Nick. I appreciate it.